I always had the energy, the ambition. Like I always knew what I wanted, but I had no idea how to achieve those things. Spoiler alert, I don't think anybody really does. Like you
I
just
agree.
like the whole thing here is you just keep going. You keep the compass pointed in the direction you want to go and you just keep going.
Welcome to the Scalability Code, the podcast that helps you get out of the shit show and start growing your business. And now for your host, Matt Haney.
All right, folks, here we are today, another episode of the Scalability Code. Today, joined by Ryan Hogan. Ryan, thanks for joining us. I know you're used to being on the other side of the microphone, interviewing folks. You've got a very successful podcast, and you've built some great businesses and are in the middle of building another one. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.
So we start off the same way. I ask entrepreneurs to go back and think about people in their lives that were impactful for them on their entrepreneurial journey. Maybe it was a milkman that dropped milk off on your doorstep. Do they even do that anymore? Or somebody you were adjacent to, or a father or uncle, or somebody that you saw as an entrepreneur that said, this person did it. That's really cool. I don't know how hard it is, but I want to go do it. So anybody come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, for me, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship, I think my father and my uncle had probably the biggest impact in that. Because when I think about when did I get into trying to create value in this universe, it started in third grade selling creepy crawlers. And so for me, it was like early exposure to, and it's not necessarily success. Like my dad struggled in business, but I saw him keep taking the shot. And I watched as he learned from his mistakes and just kept moving forward. But between that and then my uncle was a very successful architect in Baltimore, Maryland. And watching him, just kind of look like he always had not necessarily a fancy car, but he always had a new car. I was like, how does he do that? He's like, oh, it's a business expense. I was like, oh, what's that?
It's the write-off, son.
And now I know. But I think both of those together, which is, one, just not giving up and like consistently and constantly trying to figure out a way to create value in this world. And then the other that, very much more of a technician or he was the architect. Now he built a firm around himself, but he was still the architect at the end of the day. And so I kind of got, both sides of that.
Love that story. I've asked that question 50 times and gotten 50 different answers. I've never actually had an entrepreneur around me. Like, oh, you're the first one? That's awesome. And then multi-generations and everywhere in the middle. This is a podcast about growth, scaling. We had a chance to chat a little bit before this, so I have a kind of understanding of your background, but I'd love for you to go back to your entrepreneurial journey and give the listeners and viewers a chance to understand sort of where you were, where that got you, and sort of where you are today and your plans for the future in your current endeavor.
Yeah, and I guess my journey's been really interesting because it's been this parallel path of like two very dissimilar professional tracks. Number one, I've been in the Navy since I was 17. My mom signed my permission slip, so I've been in for 24 years now. I did 15 years active duty. I wound up going through a commissioning program, and then I've been in the reserves for the last 9 years. And so there's been like that track, which is very much the antithesis of entrepreneurship. So if entrepreneurship is like solving all these problems and there is no right answer and you're just trying to figure out the things that you need to solve in order to move the organization ahead, you compare that to the military where like, if you got a problem to solve, there is a 120-page process SOP to like go through step by step. But from an entrepreneurship standpoint, it was, selling creepy crawlers in third grade and then shoveling snow, mowing grass, doing all of those different things. The first real company that took off was called Run for Your Lives. And so there was a lot of stuff leading up to Run for Your Lives, but Run for Your Lives was the one that truly achieved some semblance of scale. It did not have a happy ending, but we did scale. And that company went from 0 to about 5 million in 2 years. And it was the first ever zombie-infested 5K obstacle course race. So if you think back to like 2010, 2011, there was Warrior Dash, Spartan Race, Tough Mudder. We were actually number 3. We didn't get any of the press because we were just this weird experience that was traveling the country. But at the end of the day, we put 120,000 participants through in 2012. Not a happy story, fairy tale ending. I made every mistake in the book. And so hired all my best friends, not for competency or skills, but just because they made me feel good. And I love them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't spell P&L. And so in the event business, everything is deferred revenue until the event actually happens. So when your bank account says, hey, there's 2 million here, there's not actually 2 million because you haven't incurred any of the expenses associated with that event. And so learned some very, very painful lessons that ultimately ended in a bankruptcy. And then fast forward 3 years. So I wound up getting a commissioning in the Navy. I was going through a program. The company bankrupted, transferred out to San Diego, drove ships for a few years, and then launched Hunt to Killer. And Hunt to Killer, very strange journey and companies, but it was originally an event where it was part escape room and part immersive theater. So we transformed a 200-acre campground into a living crime scene, and we brought participants to kind of navigate their way through a murder mystery. And it was great, but the issue that we had was that you couldn't have thousands of people standing around a crime scene. So when you think back to Run for Your Lives, everything happens in waves, and we could put 15, 20,000 people through in any given weekend. Hunt to Killer, the event, we can only put 600 people through. And so we said, well, great. Well, we have product market fit. We sold out the event, but we don't have the right business model. And so we pivoted into the subscription box business model. That took us from 0 to 55 million in about 5 years, and used a lot of lessons learned from the first company, sold it 2 years ago, and then got into talent acquisition 6 months later out of all things.
That's awesome. What did the transaction look like at sale? I mean, were you selling to a strategic or somebody wanted to operate, or for what was that? What did that look like?
Yeah, we sold to a strategic. And so we ran a very kind of typical investment banker led process. We had raised about 12 million bucks. We had a board in place. So like it was very much a true strategic investment banking process that we ran. We had 3 horses in the race at the end, and now formerly known as Relatable was the acquiring company of Hunt to Killer.
And they still have your business operating or a division of it in some capacity?
Yeah,
That was 2 years ago, I hope so.
Yeah. Everything's still there. Yeah, the team's still there, the creative team. Now, obviously, the unfortunate reality of M&A is that, especially with the strategic, there's a lot of overlap. But the core competency and the things that they needed are still operating today.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, that segues to my next question, which is, you are hiring and placing people for a living. I have myself done the same thing for majority of my career, which is helping people on their journey, an incredibly rewarding and heavy process at times. But go back through either Hunt to Killer or even back in the military, any 1 or 2 people that stuck out to you specifically that dramatically impacted your journey, either good or bad. You can reference their name or not.
Yeah. I'll start with the good, mission critical. And it was, he was my boss, and it was someone that I served with in the Navy. It's really interesting when I talk about my career, because like everything seems like this natural, like started at point A and then this normal trajectory where like it's up and to the right to point B. And that was not it.
You mean that's not how it goes? That's what I read. That's the business books.
It was the opposite. But for context, like I was an E1 twice. And the only reason that you're an E1 twice is because you got into trouble. And so I'd gotten into some pretty big trouble in the military in my first couple of years. And kind of the inflection point for me, I always had the energy, the ambition, like I always knew what I wanted, but I had no idea how to achieve those things. Spoiler alert, I don't think anybody really does. Like you just, like the whole thing here is you just keep going. You keep the compass pointed in the direction you want to go, and you just keep going. I got into trouble, and my commanding officer, everybody that was getting into trouble, because I was still in the schoolhouse, was getting kicked out of the program. So I started off as an air crewman. That's my helmet behind me. I flew in the back of MH-53 Echo helicopters, and then eventually did test and development. And I was in this program where I was on a year. We're post 9/11, and so it was a very high rate of recruiting for the military. And so a lot of the schools were jammed up. So I was sitting in a schoolhouse for a year, just basically doing nothing. We would show up, we would swab the deck, and then we would go back to the barracks. And I was like, what a waste. Like, I'm just wasting away here. I'm not growing I'm not doing anything. And so I left and eventually came back, got smart. But anybody that was getting into trouble was just getting kicked out of this aircrew program. And my captain at the time was basically like, I'm going to retain you in the program. So I got all the things. I got knocked down in rank, half month's pay times 2, restriction for 60 days. Like I got the maximum of everything, but he kept me in the program. And he basically said, I see something in you. And so I'm going to give you a second chance when it comes to your career. But in the short term, like you're going to feel the pain of the consequences of what you did.
Yeah.
And that was it, man. From that point forward, at least in that specific instance, like I was like, I'm not going to let this guy down. This guy I don't know what he sees, but I'm not going to let this person down. And the rest is history.
That's awesome. Is he still around, and do you have a relationship with him still?
I just went through this, what is it? It's called The Artist Way. And it's like this 12-week program. And like one of the exercises is to write a letter to someone that was meaningful. I was not able to locate him, but I wrote him a letter. So maybe I'll fire up the
Did you
machine
send
again.
it to him? Does he know how to? Who knows?
Nope. Who knows? I still have it
In
though.
today's world, you can't track this guy down.
And we're a recruiter. I should just ask my team to plug it into the system. You're right, Matt.
I think
All right, I'll
there's some
take the step.
technology that can help you here. I'm just going out there. There might be a way. Well, that's awesome. I love it when people see a special thing in someone and are willing to invest in that. I feel like sometimes that can go the other way, where I'm working with a visionary entrepreneur who's locked in on helping someone, and I'm constantly telling him, I'm the stranger in the room that's seeing this relationship being unhealthy. Like, you're so obsessed with fixing this person. They don't want what you're offering. You're just fixated on fixing them. But to your point, you were interested, willing, and curious, and so was the person that was working with you and investing in you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
My next question kind of goes back to the entrepreneurial journey we've talked about. Delayed decision-making is something that I think is a very fascinating topic, because there's certain circumstances where delaying a decision is going to cost you something. There's also certain circumstances where delaying a decision turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. And I'll give you a quick example of today. My oldest daughter lives in a boarding school. She's moving out to live with two of her friends. She's 16, by the way. She's an incredibly talented athlete, operating at the highest level. We agreed to get her a place where she could move out of the housing of the boarding program. So we find this place. Literally, I get the lease yesterday afternoon, and I get a phone call from the person this morning that said, someone booked in the middle of your lease. We can't lease it to you. And I was like, this was yesterday at 4:00. I couldn't have done anything more to make that move forward other than like signing right away, which would have been frivolous and, irresponsible. And now here I am back to the drawing board. So a delayed decision that negatively impacted me, but I can promise you we'll find a solve. So I don't know, does anything come to mind where you look back and you're like, that was really good or really bad?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I have like a counterexample to that of if I just did the opposite, and I probably got sucked into a terrible lease because I was like, because no one else was probably even looking at it. I'm like, gotta get it. So I literally just signed a lease yesterday for an office space. So we'll see how that goes.
Ooh, new recording studio.
That's it. My background's going to change. So if we do this again one day,
nobody will know. We'll do it.
It'll be different. What's really interesting? You just brought up this delayed decision making, and I think that's actually a problem that I have. And this is probably a part of where some of this conversation will go eventually on this podcast. But like, I'm very quick to make decisions, and like, if there's a problem, I feel like I need to solve it. And I would say where I've been most detrimental in organizations has actually been when an organization matures past a point, like delayed decision-making, which I had no idea this was a concept, is probably more advantageous to the success versus the early days. And this has been kind of a self-revelation over the last 12 months, maybe a little bit longer. But this idea of like, if I stay too long, then bad things start happening. And so like my sweet spot in organizations is pre-product market fit and moving as fast as possible to get to that product market fit. And then now at least I know I need an off-ramp. But delayed decision-making, as a for instance of this, and so relevant in the business service space. So I come from consumer space where we were spending up to $150,000 each day into Facebook advertising. When we have an idea or we want to test something, within 24 hours, we would know if we have a new product idea, if we have a new button color, whatever the question was, we would have an answer for that within 24 hours. And so we could move very fast.
Yeah.
And so that's not the case in business services. What we have realized is it takes 6 months to understand if a decision that we made all the way back then is actually working, to be able to get it through the snake and actually collect the data on it. Here's a great example. We have a podcast. It's called Confessions of an Implementer. We were 6 months into the podcast. I had signed a 12-month agreement, and I was like, this isn't working. Like, our hypothesis has been blown out. Nobody's listening to the podcast. It's not doing anything good for us. So I went back to the firm. We went out. It's not working. We're not getting any business from this. And they were like, well, you signed a 12-month contract. And so this whole like delayed decision making, the theory was like forced upon me because we were locked in. And literally, like probably within 60 to 90 days after that conversation, things just took off for us. And like that was like magic or happenstance. Like, I didn't delay the decision. I went out of this contract, nothing's working. And then it took an extra 3 months. And what those situations have taught me is like, this concept that you just brought up, delayed decision making, is critically important based upon where you play, the space, and how long things to take to get the right data.
Right. Well, you said the last word, unscripted. You said data. You also mentioned in that comment about the podcast, you had set your 12-month goal or contract, agreed 6 months in, you weren't hitting it, and then at some point it changed. So that whole process, decisions were made based on data. What were the metrics that you were using in that scenario that said, this is what I want, this is where I'm going, I'm not here, and now I am here? Like what? And you can't use revenue. And I think a podcast is a really good example of that, because revenue is obviously the easiest one, right? But there's got to be some other metrics that you are using. You obviously, in your ad space you were talking about, there are a zillion metrics. But what are some of your favorite metrics that have helped you on the podcast side?
Yeah, and I'll say like we were tracking the wrong metrics out of the gate. It depends on where I'm looking at metrics. So if I'm sitting on the leadership team and I'm looking at metrics, I actually want lagging indicators. And the reason for that is like, I want to know what's happening in the business today. And we are very intentional about the leading indicators are all at the core function areas. So like the operations team has leading indicators. The marketing team has leading indicators, and I can drop in and look at their leading indicators at any point. How many calls are you having? How many this? How many that? But what I want to know, like when I'm sitting on the leadership team, is like, I want to know what the outcomes of all of those different things that they're tracking and that they're setting goals against. What we were tracking in the early days, and this was the wrong thing, is we were tracking downloads. We were tracking how many people are consuming or listening to this, because we believed that that was a leading indicator based upon how many people would eventually come to us and say, hey, I have a recruiting need, therefore XYZ, and we would get a client out of it. And what we realized is like there was a disparity. So we had the leading indicator that was growing. The audience was growing, downloads were growing, listenership was all growing. But the lagging indicator of like revenue, new client acquisition, all these different things wasn't moving. We're like, that's super interesting. And so that's when I pulled the handle and tried to punch out of the contract. What we realized is we were thinking about it all wrong. Generally, when people have podcast strategies, it's about building relationships with the guest. And for us, it was never like that. That wasn't the true intention. We weren't measuring to that because we thought that conversation would get in front of our ICPs. That's not what it turned out to be. It did turn out to be the relationships. And so for us, what we started to start to turn is how many referrals are we getting? How many times are we reconnecting with these podcast guests? Are we nurturing those relationships? What is our process for nurturing those relationships? How do we do it in an authentic, genuine, and kind of go-giver way where there's zero expectation, but we at least want to know the health of that? Once we started tracking that, we started to see numbers kind of pop out. And we're like, oh, that's interesting. And then 3 months later, once we realized those numbers were going up, then new client acquisition started to go up. And so we were measuring and we were thinking about this completely the wrong way. Outcome completely better than we ever could have expected. However, the hypothesis was dead wrong going in.
You are listening to the Scalability Code. I'm your host, Matt Haney, founder of Sinclair Ventures, and we help visionary entrepreneurs like you get out of the shit show and focus on growing your business. We offer fractional COO and leadership coaching services that free up that brain of yours to focus on what's next. Learn more about us at sinclairventures.com. Now back to it. As somebody who is also hosting a podcast, surprise, that's what I'm doing. I've struggled, candidly with what does success look like for this? Because frankly, I enjoy it. It's obvious that you enjoy it as well. And that for me is a metric of success. While it's a little bit subjective, okay. But my point is that I need emo and dog food, as one of my clients says. He's like, you need to go back, eat your own dog food. So I'm eating my dog food now to go back and look at my metrics for what success looks like here, other than just the fact that I enjoy it. You talked about this earlier when referencing your buddies. I was on a Bad Boss confessional podcast. I don't know if you know Beth. She's in the EOS world. And my bad boss moment was one of my favorite moments because it was awful, but it was a great learning moment. So I'm going to flip this back to you as somebody who's now in the recruiting as a service space. Tell me your worst hiring decision, or you can even say one of the worst hiring decisions you've seen clients make, or there's got to be some reason why you decided to get into recruiting as a service. Hiring the right people is mission critical, but hiring the wrong person teaches you something. So give me something about wrong person that you've hired and the outcomes.
Yeah, for this one, I'll intentionally leave names out, but I'll give you a great example, and it's one of the reasons that I got into recruiting. And I'm not a recruiter. Maybe that's something like I shouldn't be promoting. But like I find subject matter experts. I was not a game designer. I was not an obstacle course race designer. I find brilliant humans who have mastered the craft, and then I partner with them to go and execute. So when I've gotten hiring wrong, again, not an expert recruiter, but like I can ask questions, I can read books, I can figure this whole thing out. When I got recruiting wrong in the past, it's never been because I couldn't read a resume. It has never been because I didn't know what's the subject matter expertise that the organization needs. Do they have a college education? Yeah, they do. Were they in a similar size company? Yes, they were. But 90% of the time when I've gotten hiring wrong, it's because I brought the wrong fit into the organization. I brought the wrong human. Not evil. There's certain cultures that organizations take on. Generally, if they're smaller, it takes on the culture and the value set that the founder has or the founders have. But at the end of the day, like that organization has a certain way of thinking and a certain way of operating, a certain way of making decisions. I have hired some rock stars on paper, like rock stars from SVPs from huge production companies. I've hired people that had been successful in entrepreneurship in their own right, but were looking to join something like Hunt to Killer that they could be a part of and help us grow. There was one person that truly did help us grow. This individual knew everything about how to navigate to the place we were going. When you think about, let's look at Hunt to Killer, for instance, like getting Hunt to Killer into retail, there are like, you could call somebody, you could go hire a shop to help you out, but there is a very specific path to get on retail shelves. First is generate demand. But after you've generated the demand, like there's a clear-cut path and process for how you open up those doors. We had no idea. And so there's an individual that I had hired in the past that like knocked down all of the doors, like beyond my wildest expectations as far as what we were able to do from a company standpoint. On the other side, the amount of distrust and the amount of friction that this person created inside of the organization was more detrimental than the success that we had led to from the other channels that we had opened.
So, in a revenue seat or in a revenue seat?
Ish. Yeah.
I see that a lot. The head salesperson's the king of toxicity.
That's it. And
the
I think
entitlement and the protection and the protected class, but the fear of the unknown is if I take them out of the equation, what's going to fall apart? And I will say, you do take them, and I have many times taken them out of the equation. I would say 8 out of 10 times everything has gone great, if not better. But there are times where you remove the head of the snake and the body dies. So I think it's not easy, man. So what was the outcome? You probably lost a relationship over the deal, but was there a happy ending?
Yeah, I mean, lost a relationship out of the deal, but the team rose to the occasion. And I agree with you. I might call it 9 out of 10 times from my observation. If you've got the right culture, see, here's the other issue. And this might get to the point of the 20% where you cut the head off the snake and the snake dies, is like, if they have had such a detrimental impact to the culture in which like the entire team has been watching the leader, in this case me, tolerate someone that had been deviating, like it might not work. But if you've got the right culture and you're somewhat fast to make decisions when you start to see things go in a different direction, the amount of times that it's rebounded has been more often than not. But also like the longer that you tolerate that, the longer that it shows the entire organization that like these behaviors are acceptable, and the further down the toilet the culture goes.
Could that go back to delaying decision making?
And that,
Interesting. Maybe there's
yeah,
a connection there.
yep. And maybe that's an area like, there, and I think this was your point when we were talking about this, which is just brilliant. It's like, what decision, it's almost like when you're framing a decision, it's like, there's like a toggle switch of like, should we delay this decision or should we not? And I would make an argument that like, if there's something that's impacting culture and it's through like toxic leadership or a toxic teammate, like the switch for delayed decision goes off and you do not delay that decision.
Right. And I will agree with that. But man, it's the hardest thing to do is to disrupt something that's working, right? Yeah. Revenue's there. We're doing something right. Yeah. But you're putting at risk potentially these awesome people that are on your team that are, helping row the boat with you. Give an example of when you were the bottleneck, because I deal with visionary entrepreneurs. You deal with, you are a visionary entrepreneur. You also work with a lot of visionary entrepreneurs, hiring for them. You're hiring entrepreneurs to run sales teams. Give me an example of when you knew you were the bottleneck, or now you were the bottleneck, and wrap it in a bow that says somehow to help people not be the bottleneck or be aware of when they are.
Yeah. I think like for me, I've been very fortunate just by circumstance of I haven't had the opportunity to not delegate. And I don't say that of like I'm a professional delegator. I say that because every company that I had ever started, including Talent Harbor, I was activated when we launched Talent Harbor. But every company I've always been active duty, meaning that like I had a full-time job and like this was some sort of side hustle. And so very quickly I had to figure out like how to get other people to do the things that I would have done. So in that respect, I think I've been very fortunate just based upon the circumstances in which I've launched companies. Bottleneck as far as like detriment to the company, one thing that I've learned about myself is, it goes back to the delayed decision, is like I delay no decisions. And that is, yes. Yeah. And that is a problem. In the early days when it's startup and all of these different things, like you want to get the product market fit as fast as humanly possible because you got to keep the lights on.
Yep.
Once you get the product market fit, and it depends on how you define it. So, product market fit could just be like, oh, you've got sales. It could be like, your goal is recurring revenue. Therefore, you've been able to find some sort of recurring, like however you define product market fit, but there's a market, there's a product, and it's selling. Great. What I've realized is that after that, not delaying any decisions becomes completely detrimental to the organization. And I've seen it. Like there's a pattern.
Oh, yeah, all the time. You're like, yeah, I'm dealing with it right now. I'm changing point of sale softwares for a retail company. I'm like, I told you not to, and now you're unpacking this bag that you've already packed. It's a mess. Should have delayed that decision. So
yeah. I'm actually putting this on our issues list, by the way, Matt.
You're welcome.
I thank you for this because I've never heard it. And like, I'm going to brief the team on delayed decision, and I'm going to make that a part of the process of when we frame an issue, is this a delayed decision or is this not?
Yeah, man. I didn't even think about adding it to the IDS list, but it's something. Okay. 2 more questions. One of my favorites. Think back to somebody when you were a young teen in the military screwing up who gave you a solid piece of advice. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was your spouse. But are there any solid pieces of advice that stick with you? And I'll tell you mine before you tell me yours. Back to my reference to the Bad Boss podcast with Beth I was on, talking about a decision that I made that I impacted. I was letting someone go, a senior employee, 25-year employee, and I came in as some young, arrogant asshole that said, you're fired. And this woman who was much senior to me said, hey, you have to remember the words you say, you can't put back in your mouth. And the tone in which you deliver them is important. I will never forget her saying that to me. This is not the person I fired. This is another person who was adjacent to this story. And I was like, wow, you're right. I went in. It was the right decision for the business, but I didn't handle it the right way. And the words I said came off in a way that I'm not proud of. Obviously, I'm still dealing with it today, 10 years later. But that sound advice that was given to me was, you can't put the words back in. Make sure what you're saying is intentional. Does any one nugget or tidbit that someone gave you along the way stick out to you? Or a theme? Yeah. Maybe not.
His name is Jervy Gervy, Jervy Alota. I think it's just one L, Alota. We'll keep it there. But go look him up on LinkedIn if you're listening to this. He's got 1 million followers, and he's basically like the super influencer of the Navy now.
Oh,
and
cool.
he is hands down one of the best leaders that I've ever worked for. He's still in the Navy. I think he's Captain Alota, and I got to be very careful about that because I'm still in the Navy. So he is a
Were
captain.
you a direct report?
I was.
that's
He was my
fantastic.
XO.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So he was XO, and it was a dream team. This is one of the best commands that I'd ever worked with. It was Captain Tayson, or Commander Tayson at the times, and then Jervy was XO, and they were a dream team. Like, one was good at setting the vision, the other was good at like getting shit done. And I worked very, very hard at that command, and very, very hard for both of them. And one of the things that was interesting is like I already had 10-ish years, 11-ish years in the military when I commissioned. And so like there's all these ensigns just coming out of the academy and just coming out of school. And like I'd been deployed, I'd done stuff Hurricane Katrina, I'd been all over Japan and Asia and Fifth Fleet and everywhere else. And so like I had a little bit ahead. Like I knew how to work the process and run things. And so when it was time to get qualifications, like I just did it. So we were deployed and I was like, I'm gonna get my qualifications as fast as humanly possible. And I did. And I pissed off a lot of people that I worked around. And like on the good side, I was the #1 ensign and got the fit rep. And so that was great. And when he was giving me my fit rep debrief, he said, the one thing you need to work on is you need to figure out how to bring your peers along with you. I was like, holy crap. And it's not like, I wasn't necessarily looking at it as competition, but I was like, these are peers. Like I'm going to get
I
qualified.
gotta go. I'm gonna get it done. Yeah.
And
But
the
in
advice.
the process, you unintentionally, left some folks behind. And yes, you were the shining star, but they could have been shining stars with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a
That
great
was
piece of advice.
incredibly impactful.
Got
He's
a
an
way to bring your team with you. Awesome.
amazing human being.
Jervy, I'm going to ask you for a tag with your 1 million followers on that quote.
Yeah. It's definitely do it.
Okay, last question. What makes you tick outside of work? Like what gives you, I know you're on all the time. That's your personality. You've said that. I can obviously read that in the room. But what do you do outside of work that hopefully you don't have to perform in?
Yeah. I mean, focus a lot on I've got 4 kids. And so for me, it's like focusing on being a good dad. And like the hardest thing for me is shut my brain off. And so like I try and be incredibly intentional of when I'm with my kids. And like we just got back, we went to Joshua Tree this past weekend.
So great.
Didn't even open the phone. We just drove out there. It's about 2.5 hours from where we're at. We drove around on Easter Day. We picked up some street food, which was like,
Love it.
oh my gosh, it was so good. And we came back same day. But like for me, it's really about, and I'm not good at, or I'm not even near perfect at this, but like shutting the brain off and really trying to enjoy time.
That's awesome. Yep. I had 3. You can see they're older now, 16, 14, and 10. How old are yours?
21, 17, 13, and 11.
Okay. Wow. You got a span. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, good for you,
They come
man.
with your sea bag. That's what happens when you enlist. They just
They
you're
just
like,
come
oh,
with you.
They were
Hey.
here the whole time.
There's people behind me. Ryan Hogan, what a fun interview, man. Great energy, great story, lots of humility and success. So many congrats to you on what you've built and the people around you that have helped you get there. Thanks for joining us today on the Scalability Code.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Scalability Code. If you made it this far, please follow the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's get out of this shit show together. We'll see you next time on the Scalability Code.